What's going on, guys? Welcome back to WWE Network and Show, where I, Graham G.S. and Matthews, break down all the original content you watch on the WWE Network, on Peacock, and on Vice. Today we're talking Season 5, Episode 4, I believe, of Dark Side of the Ring, Saving Face, the Brutus Beefcake Story. Not nearly as juicy as some of the other episodes, and that's not always what makes a great episode. I thought it was a good episode. There really hasn't been like a bad episode of Dark Side of the Ring yet. In the last 5 years, the last 5 seasons, it wasn't overly eventful. If you know the life and career of Brutus Beefcake, it probably wasn't anything you didn't already know. But I enjoyed it for what it was, and it's nice to have episodes with people that are still alive, here to, tell their tale and share their story of all the stuff they went through and experienced. There wasn't really a lot like the John Tenta one, which was also a good episode and a much more... This was a feel-good episode in certain respects as well, but, that one wasn't really much of a dark side of the ring. That one was... He passed away early due to cancer, I believe it was, or whatever he had passed away from a number of years ago. Obviously, Beefcake is still with us. He did go through some... pretty dark stuff. The accident that they really go in detail with, the boat accident, which is where the name of the episode comes from, Saving Face, was pretty fucking brutal. I've heard that story before, but hearing it from his perspective and the visuals, they show pictures of it, obviously, of the aftermath of the accident, but like the visuals of what actually happened while it was going on is pretty fucking jarring. That, and then some of the stuff he had to go through after wrestling and whatnot, after he lost his house, was, pretty depressing. But beyond that, otherwise, it was a pretty good episode, and pretty standard stuff, I would say. So they get into it and talk about how he was called Brutus Beefcake because of his butt, I guess. I guess they said that he had a big butt or a nice butt. I don't really know. But I guess that's where the beefcake part of his name had come from, because he had nice beefcakes. I don't know if they were joking or if that was real, but I did not know that if that's true, if that's where the name came from. Because he also said later on in the episode the name came from the beefcake part anyway. It came from Linda. So was Linda trying to tell him something? I don't know. But anyway, we hear from his current wife, Missy Leslie, who talks about being a fan of his growing up and how she was really just obsessed with him. And then she told the story of how they met and how she was doing some online dating. And I don't know when this would have been, maybe 15, 20 years ago. She was talking about online dating, and that wasn't really a thing before 15 years ago. So that's probably what we're talking about here. And I guess she found out where he lived, and she got in contact with him and said, hey, I would love to sleep with you, which is so fucking weird. He agreed, and they ended up becoming an item after that, and they haven't really been separated since. So I thought that was a very random, weird story, but that was how they came to be. But to go back a bit to the beginning, he talks about how Hulk Hogan was a childhood friend of his and how they broke into the business together. Hogan trained with Hiro Matsuda, and so because of that, he kind of broke Beefcake into the business and really helped him along. Gave him opportunities, chances to sign with all these companies, stuff like that. They became tag team partners. And because they look so similar, which I never really realized back at that point, not now, their gimmick was that they were brothers. So Beefcake's name at that point, I believe, was Dizzy Hogan. What a dumb fucking name. And that was not the first, or rather the last dumb name he would have in wrestling. Pretty fucking dumb. But they were brothers and whatnot in storyline as a gimmick. Hogan obviously went on to massive superstardom in WWF soon after and became their biggest star. And so Beefcake, being Hogan's friend, was brought in alongside Hogan. Not really at that time exactly. I'm not sure. I don't know what the timeline was exactly. But they talk about how he brought in Brutus to do him a favor. And it was really nepotism at its finest, in the sense that, hey, if I have a job here, then I'm going to bring you on in with me. And that's exactly what happened. So he talked about how Linda came up with the Beefcake name. Hogan came up with the Brutus name. That was where Brutus the Barber, or at least Brutus Beefcake, came from. They talked about the barber stuff in a second. And all the people that we hear from on the episode, Brian Knobbs of the Nasty Boys, Brian B. Blair, and a few other people, Missy Hyatt is on the episode as well. She was in the Buff Bagwell one a couple of episodes ago. They all talked about how he was an average worker. He was good, he was a nice guy, but he wasn't really anything special in the ring. He ended up teaming with Greg Valentine as the Dream Team for 3 years, and they had a WrestleMania match, I believe a WrestleMania 2. And they had success there. They ended up splitting up a couple years later. And then that was when he became the Barber. And he was given the gimmick. He threatened to quit. He thought it was the dumbest thing, which is a pretty dumb gimmick. And then Hogan said, listen, why don't you make the most of it by putting your partner, or putting your opponent rather, in a headlock and cutting their hair? That can be your gimmick. And it ended up getting over. He beat Mr. Perfect at WrestleMania, and they don't share the story here because they then go into the accident from 4th of July weekend in 1988, I think it was. But they kind of gloss over the fact that he was supposed to go on to SummerSlam and win the championship. He does mention that in the episode, and it really wasn't much more to really delve into. But instead of Ultimate Warrior, it was supposed to be Beefcake going to SummerSlam to beat Honky Tonk Man and become champion. Would it have been as memorable of a moment? I don't know. Would a Warrior still have gone to superstardom as a single star? Again, I don't know. But that was what the injury kind of derailed in the summer of 1988, which is pretty interesting. So they talk about how, and again, you've probably heard the story before because it's been shared ad nauseum over the years. It happened 33 years ago, whatever it was. They share the story of how he went to a 4th of July party and his face was basically just destroyed, literally almost destroyed by a parasailer. They were at a party and they kind of go over the details of what was going on. Everyone was drinking and partying. The driver of this boat or whatever just kind of took off without warning, and the woman that was parasailing could not avoid Beefcake. Beefcake turned around. No one had any time to even react or tell him get out of the way or whatever. She puts her knees together to kind of clear his face and instead smashes right into him, destroys his face. Brian Blair, who was there, told the story of how kind of his own experience of what happened, his series of events, the chain of events. And then he ran over and saw Beefcake's top jaw right on top of his bottom jaw. And it was just fucking gross. He had to put his thumb or his hand inside of his mouth in order to breathe because the guy couldn't breathe. He couldn't see. He was blind for a little while. It was very scary. And, they don't have the exact footage of the accident itself or footage of the incident or even they show the aftermath, but it's pretty tame stuff compared to what it actually was, I'm sure, in reality as it was going on. But they immediately called in a plastic surgeon. They sent him right away to the hospital. And Beefcake says that he told the surgeon, who we actually hear from on the episode, which I thought was cool. And the guy's older, so it was nice that they found him and he agreed to do the episode and talk about it for a little bit. Beefcake said that he told him, just kill me. Just go ahead and kill me, because he couldn't deal with the pain anymore. It was just excruciating pain. So they ended up working on it for 16 hours. They reconstructed his entire face, rebuilt his skull. They went through the whole process of what they did, how they did it, just gross shit. They talk about how he couldn't see for 24 hours because the eyelids were sewn shut because they had to be in order to reconstruct the face. Just disgusting stuff. So they put him into a coma, medically induced coma. And the doctor said it would be really nice if we had someone at bedside, in the hospital for when he wakes up. Because when he wakes up, we don't really know how he's going to react. Is he going to freak out? Will he be upset? Will he be okay? We don't exactly know. So his parents had died 2 years within each other, very quickly apart. His wife had just divorced him. So he didn't really have anyone with him. So he called up Hogan. Or he didn't call up Hogan. Someone called up Hogan. And Hogan left his pregnant wife in California. They said how far along she was, I don't know. But he left his wife at the time. Didn't leave her, but, went to go visit Beefcake in the hospital and was there by bedside for him for when he woke up. And Missy shares this story, his now wife, not Missy Hyatt. There's two Missys on this episode, interestingly enough. She shares the story of how his eye fell out while he was leaving the hospital room. How true that is, I don't know, but it's pretty fucking gross. And it takes me back to some of those episodes earlier on in Dark Side of the Ring where, it wasn't Dark Side of the Ring, it was Tales from the Territory, where it felt like every episode they were talking about someone losing an eye. And some of the stories were just completely ridiculous. But it was a story nonetheless. So they talked about how he had to learn to talk again and all this other sort of stuff because they had to reconstruct again his entire face. So Sensational Sherry went to go visit him in the hospital, brought him a stuffed bear and whatever. And they told her, listen, you can't freak out when you see him because it might freak him out. And sure enough, she freaked the fuck out and she lost her shit. And he took it in stride, laughed about it, whatever, which I thought was funny. He took it on the chin, thankfully not on the face. And she was just freaked out about the whole thing. It must have been pretty bad. I don't know how soon after the accident that was, but it must have been pretty bad in the aftermath for her to react the way that she did. So he eventually, however much long later, I don't know, but they talked about how he got to work out again, but not wrestle. So Hogan, being the good friend that he was to him at the time, made sure that he did not go broke. The medical expenses were piling up. So he cast him in the movie that he did, the Christmas movie, Santa with Muscles, which is infamously terrible. I've actually never seen it myself, but I should probably go watch it one of these days. He cast him in that movie and, in order to get him apart and make him some money, whatever. So while he was out injured out of the ring, he ended up getting the barbershop, obviously the talk show. How long it lasted, again, I don't know. That was where the big Jannetty-Shawn Michaels split happened in early 92, or early 93 it would have been, right? Not 92? No, it was 92. It was 92. Or was it 93? I don't remember. I'm pretty sure it was 93. But anyway, they talked about how Psycho Sid, or Sid Vicious at the time, destroyed the set. I think it was 92 because Vicious at that time was feuding with Hogan, and that would have been early 92. And it was probably done with the idea that, hey, Beefcake is Hogan's friend. This is his way of getting back at Hogan. And, maybe that's why they did it. I'm not sure. So he ended up coming back in the ring soon after. And, well, they also talked about, like, the steroid trial stuff, and Vince wanted him to be, like, his golden goose, and he said, no, I'm not going to bury the company. I'm not going to bury this guy, that guy, whatever. I thought that was kind of random. They actually covered the steroid trial, obviously, in great detail on the show back in season 3, I want to say, a few years ago. So he came back to the ring in 1993, returned to WrestleMania with Hogan as his partner. I think they either walked in as tag team champions, they showed them as the champions. I don't remember WrestleMania 9 all that well, but I do know that he teamed with Hogan on the show. And that was the same show Hogan ended up coming back out of the end and winning the WWE title from Yokozuna. So he ended up getting fired from the company soon after. Hogan immediately brought him into WCW when he went to WCW and later on in 1993. They talk about all the awful gimmicks that he had, and even Eric Bischoff, who was interviewed for this thing, talked about, like, he was a good guy, did what he was told, whatever, but he just couldn't get over. Like, even Brian Obb said that guy just wasn't over. He was a decent worker, but he wasn't that great to the point where, hey, like, let's use him for this and that. Like, they just had him go through all these terrible gimmick changes. He did talk about undergoing a massive body transformation towards the end of his WCW run. 45 years old, lost a shit ton of weight, 5% body fat, grew out his hair, looked amazing, like a completely different person. Terrible name in Disciple. He was called Disciple. I don't know why, but he was really proud of that run for however long it lasted. I think at that point he was in the NWO. But they talk about the subsequent fall from grace. His money manager stole all of his money, and he had to sell his house that he worked for so many years. So his wife ended up leaving him, not Missy Leslie, but his wife at the time, ended up leaving him and brought their daughter to Boston. So he went to Boston, I guess, to be closer to the family. And he ended up working basically as a subway ticket collector in Boston. And it was not a very good job. He fucking hated living in Boston. It was too cold. He was there for a long time. And he saw rats down there in the fucking subway, just like really gross shit. They share the story of how when he was at work one day, he dropped he didn't say it was a bag of cocaine. Missy said it was ibuprofen or something like that. It's like, dude, what are you fucking talking about? And he had to go to rehab after that as well. And they thought it might have been anthrax. Some random woman picked it up and it went kind of like poof. And they thought it was anthrax, like that sort of thing, like a virus. And, that was like a big thing back at that point in 2004. So they freaked out, ended up finding out it was just cocaine. And he said it was a big misunderstanding, even though it was probably cocaine. Had to go to rehab, like I said. Ended up getting fired from that job. And he couldn't have been happier, he said. Ended up taking pills and whatnot, drinking, because he couldn't really deal with the pain from his wrestling career. Probably the face trauma, too. I don't know if he still deals with stuff to this day, like his face hurting and shit from the accident 33 years ago. He didn't mention that, so probably not, but I assume he was taking pills for all the bumps he was taking in wrestling, I would have to imagine. So that was when he met Missy, I guess around that time. Missy Leslie. And she ended up bringing him in, and she was like the best thing that ever happened to him, he said, and all this other sort of stuff. Around 2008, got back into wrestling, visited Hogan, reconnected. It went well, they said, and then the next night, Missy said that it was like a flip was switched. A switch was flipped, rather. Not a flip was switched. That makes no sense. A switch was flipped, and he was completely, like, nasty towards the both of them, specifically her, and they said that he just doesn't like her, and she said, listen, I try to stand up for him. He's not working the show. Beefcake this isn't working the show for $300. That's just fucking stupid. So, by her perspective, she was just standing up for him. And Hogan didn't like that. And again, there's probably some truth somewhere in the middle. B. Brian Blair even said that Beefcake wasn't really appreciative or grateful for anything that Hogan ever did for him throughout his life and career. So that was probably a factor as well. He even said that Hogan said about Beefcake, I just had to write him off. Like he just couldn't deal with him anymore. So the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle there. But Beefcake says that Missy, his wife, was understood and people just don't get her, blah, blah, blah. But he's doing well now. They show him at a signing, some Comic-Cons, reunites with Greg Valentine, who we hear a lot from on this episode as well. Hogan actually did induct him into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2019. But Missy said while they're rewatching that footage, he has not seen Hogan. They have not seen Hogan in person since then. That was 5 years ago. So Hogan probably just agreed to do it as a favor or whatever, just for the publicity of it, just to look good or whatever, and they haven't talked to each other since. And he wants to. He feels like, hey, listen, if we could talk it through, I love you, I want to tell you I love you, and we can be friends again, whatever. Hogan probably doesn't see it that same way. He did a radio interview that they shared an excerpt from on this episode from 2023. So it wasn't like, I mean, he knows the situation. He obviously has his own reasons for why he doesn't talk to Beefcake anymore, and that's their business. But I thought it was interesting. So a good episode, not exactly the most eventful. And again, a lot of this stuff was already common knowledge. Even the boat thing, and I'm not really deep in the wrestling lore from back then, but even I had already known about that and had heard about it. But just to hear it from his perspective and the visuals and the photos was definitely interesting to say the least. So a good episode, not a great episode. Certainly won't go down as one of the more must-see episodes of Dark Side of the Ring, but I enjoyed it for what it was. And if nothing else, like I said earlier about the Bagwell episode, earlier on 2 weeks ago, that it's nice to have someone on the show that was focused on profile that's still alive. Because a lot of these guys are no longer alive. It was funny when they were showing the barbershop. They talked the steroid trial right afterward. That in and of itself was an episode. Marty Jannetty was obviously an episode. They showed Jake Roberts on the barbershop. Not him specifically, but his family, his father, was an episode at one point of Dark Side of the Ring. And there was another person too. I'm like, oh, I know that guy, I know that guy, I know that guy. I mean, I knew them all anyway, but like the fact that they were all connected through this show says a lot. It speaks volumes. But appreciate you guys checking out my review of the show. Be sure to check out all my other Dark Side of the Ring reviews in the description box down below. We should have the latest Dark Side of the Ring review up at some point, probably later on during WrestleMania weekend, if not next week. I don't know when I'll have a chance to watch the episode. Hopefully a little bit later on in the week. I watched this one late, so that review will be up at some point, so keep an eye out. But thank you guys for checking out the review. I appreciate it. Enjoy WrestleMania week. A lot more content to come, so subscribe if you haven't already. Like this video, drop a comment, share the video as well. All the support is greatly appreciated. Enjoy WrestleMania week, folks. I'm Graham G.S. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.